Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Happy to be with you this afternoon. We've got a beautiful day here in the Washington, D.C. area, and there's a lot going on. So I really wanted to start by talking a little bit about the Supreme Court nomination that Joe Biden has made and a little bit about how it works. Most people assume, and some people in the Senate will say this, that the president has a right to choose his own people, and that elections have consequences and the like. But here's the reality. The Constitution is set up so that you and I are represented in this process through our senators. And of course, the Senate was initially picked by the states. And so it was set up actually as a way of making sure the Supreme Court that there was protection for the states from Supreme Court nominees who might lean too far towards federal powers. So that was the initial intent. That's how come the Senate has confirmation powers and the House does not. But right now, the way with direct election senators, this is the one place where we have a say so in terms of this confirmation. And that's true whether Donald Trump's picking the president, Joe Biden's picking president, or some person from the planet Mars is elected president in 100 years and they're picking the president. The Senate, it has to advise, it's called advise and consent, and the Senate has to consent to the pick. And so it's a simple majority process. The Senate can say yes to the Biden nominee simply by having all 50 Democrat senators vote in favor of that nominee, and the vice president vote in favor of that nominee. But the Senate has a role. The Senate has a real role. They have a responsibility and a duty to question that nominee on judicial philosophy, question that nominee, and really try to get to the meat and bones of the meat of where that nominee is going to come down on judicial issues. Try to determine whether that nominee has the temperament necessary for the Supreme Court, and then make a decision whether they want to give this person a lifetime appointment. The person who Joe Biden's nominated is a woman named Ketanji Brown Jackson, and I have to tell you, I keep writing it Jackson Brown, and it's just a music thing. But it's Brown Jackson, so I apologize if I ever write out there. If I say during this little broadcast, I say Jackson Brown, you'll know that I'll be humming "Doctor My Eyes" in the back of my head. But nonetheless, so she started the process. The Senate started the process today of that nomination process, where the Senate Judiciary Committee is having hearings. One of the interesting challenges is, in order to discover whether a person who's nominated has, meets the qualifications, many times these people have a large amount of public records that are available from other public service that would really reveal who they are as a justice, who they'd be as a person, what their judicial philosophy is. For instance, Ketanji Brown Jackson was in fact on the U.S. Sentencing Commission as co-chairman, and in spending time on the U.S. Sentencing Commission as a co-chairman, she has a lot of back and forth emails talking about different sentencing philosophies and really revealing how she views the role of the prosecution and the defense and what actual sentences should be meted out. This is very important when it comes to cases like death penalty cases or cases which might contend that the sentences should be reduced on a whole class of crimes because they disproportionately affect one type of person. So there's a lot of interesting aspects to this. And the fact of the matter is there's tens of thousands of emails and other papers from the U.S. Sentencing Commission that the Biden administration has not come forward with, has not given to the Senate. This is a reasonable request by the Senate. This is not just a fishing expedition looking at people's high school yearbooks. This is a reasonable request. It directly impacts how she's going to rule in the Supreme Court in doing this lifetime job. And the Senate, on both sides of the aisle, should be really firm in requesting this data and a second chance to actually interview the candidate through a public hearing once they get this data. Is inexcusable for it not to have been made available. And the fact of the matter is the Biden administration should have had it made available immediately, because she was one of 3 people who they were considering. And given that, one would think if they were actually vetting her, trying to figure out who the right person was and who could withstand scrutiny, they would have gotten this data already and reviewed it themselves to find out what they were going to be coming up against. But, like always, that doesn't appear to have happened. So, the Sentencing Commission has a job. They've got to get this data to the Senate so the Senate can look at it. There are some things that have come out of that, and these are, they're not as powerful as if we had the actual documents, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that she was really somebody who was constantly talking down the length of sentences for sexual predators, particularly pornographers and child pornographers. And that's in terms of what those sentencing guidelines should be. And let me just be clear. The U.S. Sentencing Commission makes recommendations to Congress about what federal sentencing guidelines should be. So they might say, we think that if you're convicted of crime A, you should get 1 year in federal penitentiary. If you're convicted of crime B, you should get 50 years in federal penitentiary. So that's kind of what they do. And it generally consists of judges and retired judges and other attorneys general, various people who are leaders in the law, and they're appointed on a partisan basis. So, obviously, you're going to have people with one sort of idea about sentencing if they're being appointed by a Democrat, and another if they're appointed by a Republican. So, but essentially the Sentencing Commission, their job is to recommend sentencing guidelines to Congress, which Congress can say, that's interesting, I'm not doing that, or they could take their suggestions and turn them into law. So that's what that is. And that's why any discussions back and forth related to sentencing guidelines, whether it be on arson on a federal land or other things like, it could be any number of federal crimes. It bears real relevance to any job she would do as a Supreme Court justice. Now, this same judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson, was interviewed earlier last year, middle of last year, and confirmed to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. And so some say, well, she's already gone through this process 9 months ago, and it's ridiculous to put it through it again. Difference is, senators there's a lot of people who get nominated for district courts of appeal and for courts of appeals and for district judgeships, and some of them turn into major battles. But by and large, the level of scrutiny for lesser federal judges is really up to advocacy groups to do, and to try to convince people if they find something really egregious about somebody to have them be disqualified by senators. And so we saw that process and play out in some cases in the Biden administration, more cases during the Trump administration. Let's face it, the Democrats were way more aggressive on trying to contest every single thing in the Trump administration. And the Republicans in the Senate, even though it's a 50-50 split, have us effectively on most things just rolled over and said, whatever you want. And much to the disappointment of many of us that they haven't been fought harder. But this is one where I think they really need to, and I think they will. And it isn't because Ketanji Brown Jackson isn't somebody who they would have picked, because she isn't somebody they would have picked. But it's about whether or not she has the ability to do this job and temperament to do this job, and is her judicial philosophy in line with the basic judicial philosophy of the United States of America. So hence why the U.S. Sentencing Commission is important. Other things that are important is Ketanji Jackson Brown See, I did it. Ketanji Brown Jackson has said in a lecture that she gave in 2020. So this is a long time ago. This is 2 years ago, year and a half ago. She highlighted a person named Derek Bell, and Derek Bell is he's kind of the godfather of the critical race theory, the theory that our country was founded on evil principles and slavery is the original sin. And as a result, everything that's comes out of our country is naturally fruit of a poison tree. A theory that basically discounts the U.S. Constitution as being really a valid and moral document. And so it's it's rather important what she thinks about critical race theory. And she said in a 2020 lecture that she had Derek Bell's book that laid out critical race theory, quote unquote, on their coffee table for many years. So, I mean, this isn't like, here's the album from the trip to Alaska. This is a book that lays out a philosophy, an underlying philosophy that is racist at its core, and is really discounts America and the greatness of America, and deliberately does so. It was designed to do that. And so, if she had that table on her, or that book on her coffee table, one has to guess that she was doing it because she wanted to show that point of view to any visitors who came to her house. And folks, that's a choice, but is that a choice that you want somebody who's going to make one of 9 making rulings on whether the Constitution should be followed or not? I don't know that is. I think we're going to find out a lot more in these hearings about that. And she may have some explanations on it, but that'll be up to her. We've got a lot of different things like that are coming up. The fact of the matter is that right now, Senator John Cornyn from Texas, is a Republican, said that he would be surprised if the Democrats on 50, that all the Democrats don't vote for her for confirmation. But I do think there isn't this great fervor of a fight, as you might see it, whether they think they can pick off Democrats. There's obviously, you look at a Manchin from West Virginia, you look at a Tester from Montana, you can look at a few, maybe Macio Cortez from Nevada, maybe Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire. Those are ones that you might have a chance to get just because they're up in cycle or they represent a very, very, very red state. And some of the viewpoints that they would be voting on would be counter to what their constituents would like. But by and large, the Republicans have made a decision. They're going to make a real forceful presentation, from what we can tell, but they're not going to go to the wall to try to block this nomination. Having said that, you should know who she is, because this is somebody who praised the 1619 Project, which is the entirety of the 1619 Project was built around the idea, once again, that America's evil. And it was designed to say the America pre-arrival of the Pilgrims, 1620, was better than America post-arrival of the Pilgrims. Is a direct attack on Judeo-Christian Western culture, and a deliberate one. It's one that was built around faulty premises and has been debunked by an awful lot of people in terms of the basic premise that it has. But it came out of the New York Times, and it's actually rampaging through our universities as being the new way of teaching history, that America is bad and the rest, and because America is bad, it's illegitimate. And so we have no moral authority in the world, that capitalism is bad, that every aspect of America, everything that made America great has made America great, is in fact evil at its core. And once again, if those senators aren't willing to fight over the concept that a member of the U.S. Supreme Court would be somebody who supports those theses, it's really hard to imagine what they will fight over. But that's Ketanji Brown Jackson, and and you'll be seeing a lot about this week. So I would just keep my eyes open. I just want to provide some context of what you're going to be looking at. It's kind of infuriating, but it's I don't know what's going on with my stupid. I'm going to figure out how to get rid of these. So sorry, there was somebody who was posting on this who had no business being there. And so there you go. I think the main thing is to have a conversation with your Senate office, get in touch with them, let them know what you think, because it's and demand that they put her through a very vigorous process, and no vote for confirmation until all the records are turned over. Because I think, we can talk about a lot of philosophy, and they're going to do that. But ultimately, I want to know what kind of sentencing she was pushing for. And because that tells you what we're going to get out of that Supreme Court. And if she's writing majority opinions, and so this isn't about a 6-3 supposed conservative majority now. It's about who's on the court 20 years from now. The presidents pick people who they expect to be on the court for 15 to 30 years. That's the presidential legal legacy. And because of that, it's important to know where they are now, because you'll have a better idea of where they're going to be 20, 30 years ago when they may be in a majority, and when their opinions can actually do real damage or positive things for the country. And that's why this is important. I want to talk about something else also, because I found it to be reminding me of something ALG worked on really hard for about a year and a half. And since Biden became president, we kind of blew it up and said, it became not as big of a focus. We do some stuff at the state level on this, but doing it at the federal level is kind of a waste of time. But we have been very involved in trying to get U.S. pension funds and U.S. Retirement funds of all types to not be able to actually invest in Chinese companies. And the reason for that is twofold. Obviously, China is a country that is committed, utterly and completely committed to defeating the United States, whether it be through economic surrender or through warfare. Every dollar we push into a Chinese company Chinese companies that are on exchanges are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And so every dollar we push through a Chinese company is a dollar that's going and actually, lifting up a company that is that's operating counter to the United States interests. And that's whether it's spy gear or it's defense contracting, but even if it's a property development firm in China, if the Chinese Communist Party or the prime beneficiaries and controlling interests, any profits or dividends that go from that company, from the capitalization of that company, the CCP benefits from it, and hence America doesn't. And so we've got the national security concern, but on the other hand, and this is a straight investor concern, and under the law, which is known as the Employee Retirement Investor Security Act, or ERISA, under the law, there is a requirement that investments meet fiduciary standards, meaning you have to be able to put them through standards of, have they been through an audit? Are they sound financially? Or you don't want people putting their IRAs and SEPs and pensions into a Bernie Madoff investment that is not transparent and you don't know what it is, and have people lose their retirement based upon not putting it into a suitable investment. So that's the idea behind it. And so here's what's happened. There's a company, and it's a massive commercial property development company called Evergrande. It's got an E at the end. And that company essentially can't pay its bills and is going broke. They had to stop trading in the Hong Kong exchange because they can't pay their bills. They are hundreds of billions of dollars in debt. They were just ordered by the Chinese government to they built 39 buildings on the Hainan Peninsula, which I don't know where it is, which the Chinese government said, oh, you have to tear them all down. So the Evergrande company clearly has fallen out of favor with the Chinese government, which means they're going to be sacrificed. And it doesn't have anything to do with their bottom lines. It has to do with, if you fall out of favor with the Chinese government, you end up getting creamed. And Evergrande has been one of those companies that's been building a lot of buildings that ended up the Chinese government telling them to build the buildings, but now they don't want to pay the people who funded those buildings. So here's the deal. It's not just if you invest in Evergrande and you're going to lose your shirt, but if you invest in a Chinese bank that gave money to Evergrande, or another bank from around the world that gave money to Evergrande, you're going to lose your shirt. So it's because this is a lot of money that they're desperately trying not to default on. And so they're in trouble. Point for our investors there's no U.S. investments, retirement investors have absolutely no business being in a company where you can't trust their bottom line, and their filings aren't opaque or are opaque. They're not transparent. And so you really don't know what their risks are and what the rewards are. And so we have no business investing in those places. And retirement funds in particular have no business investing in those places. States who have investments invest a lot of assets because they have various fund accounts, like for university systems, or when you prepay a tuition, they take that money and they invest it around the world and get a return on that investment. And that return can be, if they're invested in places which aren't safe, they're going to end up losing that money, and the taxpayers can end up holding the bag. So there's things like that there's really no business having investments in China. Evergrande is just a reminder of the danger of that. And, take a look. If you have, for instance, Vanguard funds, Vanguard is invested all over China, and you can't really get out of it. So if you have Vanguard funds, you're invested in China. So look at those portfolios that they send you with all the companies they're invested in. Take a look at those. And if you don't like who your mutual funds, who your index funds are invested in, if you don't like who your financial advisor is investing you in, then tell them not to. And tell them if they can't put you in an investment that doesn't include China or other places that aren't opaque, that aren't transparent. But if you don't want to invest in China, tell your investment advisor you don't want to invest in China. If they can't accommodate you, get another investment advisor. Ultimately, it's your money. You have to make those decisions. If you're passively invested through a mutual fund, find one that's not invested in China and go there. The fact of the matter is there's a huge risk premium for China, and there's a lot of really massively wealthy people who are investing a lot of money in China, and they want to drag you along, and they want to invest your money in China, and you don't have to let them. So it's your money. Just because you have a mutual fund, still your money. Pension fund a little harder if you're a public employee, or private pension fund a little harder. But you can go to your pension managers and say, I don't want our pension money invested in China, and get other people who are similarly invested in a pension to say the same thing. Because ultimately, the real financial blackmail that China can do on America has very little to do with the $1 trillion in federal notes that they hold, because that's only 3% of our total debt out there. Where they can do damage is by essentially taking down and driving the values down of our pension funds and of our 401ks, because they're stocked full of 6-8% China in them, and as a result, they can tank the big companies tomorrow, and just by saying they're going to, and effectively tank part of your retirement. And there's nothing you can do about it unless you get out of Chinese investments. So that's what that was kind of the, that was what I wanted to talk about on that. There's a lot of stuff, and I apologize. I thought I blocked this person. But there's a lot of stuff we can do on that. Just, you have to be active. Look to ALG, Americans for Limited Government. We're going to have another campaign coming up on that pretty rapidly. This Evergrande thing kind of just reminds me about how important it is. So we will do what we need to do to help out. Because we've got some jerk on here who's putting stuff in the chat that I don't really want in there, I'm going to just, just encourage you to take a hard look on our good friends on Capitol Hill. Tell your senators to really hold Ketanji Brown Jackson's feet to the fire. If I were a senator, I wouldn't vote for her, and I would encourage you to hold them to that same standard. I don't believe somebody who supports critical race theory, somebody who believes that essentially views the world through racist lens, has any business being on the Supreme Court. And as a result, she would have the burden of proof would be on her to show that she didn't believe that, based upon what she has said in the past about people who hold those beliefs and have been leaders in pushing those beliefs on America. So with that, I just want to wish you a great day, and hopefully we will be back tomorrow. So with that, take care.